Chapter 1. Quality Control. Joe Sullivan had been working the overnight shift at City Central Blood Services for 11 months, and in that time she had developed 3 unshakable professional convictions. That the label printer was haunted, that someone in the Tuesday morning crew was stealing her good pens, and that the man currently standing in her lobby at 1:47 a.m. had no idea what a blood bank actually looked like from the inside. He was tall enough that the fluorescent lights hit him wrong, throwing shadows under cheekbones that looked like they'd been filed to a point. Dark hair, dark suit, the kind of expensive that didn't crease even at this hour. He was holding a clipboard. She hadn't given him a clipboard, so he'd brought his own, and he was staring at the temperature readout on the storage unit with the expression of a man inspecting a war crime. "Can I help you?" Joe said. He didn't look at her. "I'm here for the inspection." "What inspection?" "The quality assurance audit of your storage facilities. I have an appointment." Joe looked at her screen, looked at the empty appointment log, looked back at him. "No, you don't." He turned. His eyes were dark, almost black, and when they landed on her, there was a half-second pause, something behind the composure that she couldn't name. Then it smoothed over. "I assure you, the appointment was made through the appropriate channels." "The appropriate channel is me. I'm the channel. And the channel says you don't have an appointment." She tilted her head. "Who are you?" "Edmund Vane." "Right." She looked at his clipboard. It had nothing on it, just a blank sheet of paper clipped to a very expensive leather board. "And what are you inspecting, Edmund?" "The integrity of your cold chain storage protocols." At 1:47 in the morning. Quality does not observe business hours. She stared at him. He stared back. He did not blink. She noticed this because she was waiting for it, and it didn't come, and the not coming lasted long enough to be weird. "Okay, Fangs," she said. "Let's see your credentials." Something happened to his face. It was very small. A shift in the jaw, a flicker behind the eyes, and then it was gone. "I beg your pardon?" "Credentials, badge, authorization letter, something that says you're allowed to be in my blood bank at 2 in the morning looking at things." "You called me Fangs." "You showed up at a blood bank in the middle of the night in a suit that costs more than my rent. You've earned it." She crossed her arms. "Credentials." He looked at her for a long time. Not angry exactly. More like a man who had been handed a word problem in a language he'd forgotten he didn't speak. "I don't have credentials with me," he said finally. "Then you don't have an inspection." Another silence. Then, "You're not concerned that I might be someone significant?" "Significant people have appointments." His jaw tightened, loosened, tightened again. He put the blank clipboard under his arm. "I'll come back with credentials." "You do that, Fangs." He turned and walked to the door. His footsteps made no sound on the linoleum, which was another thing she noticed and filed away and decided to think about never. At the door, he stopped. Without turning around, he said, "Your tie is ugly." Joe looked down at her lanyard. It had cartoon blood drops on it that said, "Be positive," which had been funny when she'd bought it and was still funny now. "It's a lanyard." "It's an abomination." "Good night, Fangs." He left. The door closed behind him with the soft click of someone who was used to doors doing exactly what he wanted. Joe stood in the empty lobby and realized 2 things. 1, his skin had been cold when his hand brushed the counter, the kind of cold that didn't come from weather. And 2, he had smiled, just once, just barely, when she called him Fangs, and it had looked like it hurt him. She went back to labeling blood bags and didn't think about it. She thought about it. He came back 4 days later. This time he had credentials. They were beautiful. Embossed letterhead, an official seal she'd never seen from any regulatory body, a signature that looked like it had been written with a quill. "These are fake," Joe said. "They are not fake. This seal doesn't correspond to any accreditation organization I've ever seen, and I've seen all of them, Because I'm the one who handles compliance for this entire facility. She held the letter up to the light. Also, this paper is better quality than anything a government agency has used since 1987. The silence that followed was different from the last one, heavier. He was looking at her the way you look at a lock you thought was decorative and have just discovered is real. You noticed the paper. I notice everything. It's my job. She put the fake credentials on the counter. What do you actually want, Fangs? He was quiet for 4 seconds. She counted. I would like to see how you store the O negative. Why? Because it matters to me. It was the first honest thing he'd said. She could tell because his voice dropped half a register, and the carefully constructed sentence structure fell apart into something blunt and real. Fine, she said, but you're wearing a visitor badge and you're not touching anything. She gave him a badge that said, "Hello, my name is," and wrote Fangs on it in red marker. He looked at it like she'd handed him a live grenade. This is not my name. It's the name I have for you. Clip it on. He clipped it on. Over the pocket of a suit that probably cost $4,000, he clipped on a paper badge that said Fangs in red marker. Joe gave him the tour. She showed him cold storage. She showed him the centrifuge. She showed him the cross-match station and the antigen typing lab and the backup generator that kicked in during blackouts. She explained the chain of custody from donation to transfusion, the shelf life of packed red cells, the difference between FFP and cryoprecipitate. He listened to all of it. Not the polite listening of someone waiting for their turn to talk. The focused, unbroken attention of someone who was cataloging every word. He asked 3 questions, each precise. At the door, she handed him a juice box from the donor recovery station. Apple. The kind they gave to people who'd just had blood drawn. For after your donation, she said. I didn't donate. Consider it aspirational. He took the juice box. He held it like a man holding a document he intended to study later. He walked out into the dark and didn't look back. Joe found the blank clipboard on the counter. He'd left it behind. The leather was cold to the touch, much colder than a clipboard should be at room temperature. She put it behind the reception desk and went back to work. Chapter 2: The Inspections. The inspections became weekly. He showed up every Tuesday at 1:45, 13 minutes before her break, wearing a different suit that cost the same unconscionable amount. He had new credentials each time, each more elaborate, each equally fake. The third week's version included a watermark. Getting closer, Joe said, holding it up, but you misspelled hematology. I did not. H-A-E-M, that's the British spelling. We're in America, Fangs. We are in a city that was founded by the Dutch. The spelling conventions of this country are an ongoing negotiation. The negotiation ended in 1828. Update your paperwork. She let him in anyway. She always let him in. She wasn't sure when that had started being automatic, but it was, and she decided not to examine it. He brought her coffee on the 4th Tuesday. Black, from the all-night diner 3 blocks away, in a proper ceramic mug he'd apparently carried through the streets at 2 in the morning. The disposable cups at that establishment are an insult to the beverage, he said. You brought me coffee in a ceramic mug. Yes, from 3 blocks away. It's not a significant distance. You carried an open mug of hot coffee 3 blocks at 2 a.m. through downtown, and you didn't spill a single drop. I don't spill things. She took the coffee. It was perfect. She didn't tell him that. How did you know I take it black? I observed your desk. There is no sugar. There is no creamer. There is an empty coffee pot with residue consistent with black drip coffee that has been sitting for approximately 7 hours. You analyzed my coffee residue. I noticed your coffee residue. There is a difference. Is there? Analyzing would imply intent. I merely observed. The observation was involuntary. Your involuntary observations are very detailed, Fangs. He didn't respond to that, but the muscle at his jaw ticked once. and she filed that away too. On week 5, she cut her finger on a label edge. It was nothing, a paper cut, barely a bead of blood, but his reaction was instantaneous and total. His entire body went still. Not the pause still she'd gotten used to, where he stopped moving for a beat too long. This was different. This was the stillness of something that had been triggered. You should bandage that, he said. His voice was perfectly level. His eyes were locked on the wall behind her, deliberately not looking at her hand. It's a paper cut. Nevertheless. She looked at him. His fingers were gripping the edge of the inventory rack. Not white-knuckled, but pressed flat against the metal, as if anchoring himself to something solid. Are you okay? I'm fine. You're not breathing. I don't need to breathe. You usually do it anyway. The not doing it is making me nervous. He inhaled. Deliberately, performatively, the way someone does when reminded. It didn't look natural. It looked like a man picking up a tool he'd put down. It's a paper cut, she said again. I know what it is. Then why are you holding the rack like it owes you money? He looked at her. The dark eyes had something behind them. Not the war crime expression, not the inspection face. Something older and more honest and significantly more dangerous. Because it matters less than the alternative. She bandaged the cut. He didn't relax for another 4 minutes. She timed it. Your suit's wrong, she said on week 6. He looked down at himself. Dark gray, immaculately cut, the kind of subtle stripe that announced money without raising its voice. This suit was made by a tailor whose family has been dressing. It's too dark for your skin. You're already pale as hell. You need warmth. A navy, maybe. Or, do you even own anything that isn't charcoal? He stared at her. She could see the exact moment something behind his composure shifted. Not anger, not surprise. Something more dangerous. Interest. You're giving me wardrobe advice. I'm giving you information. What you do with it is your problem. She sipped the coffee. Still didn't say it was perfect. Also, you're staring at my neck, Fangs. I'm going to need you to stop that. He looked away. Fast. The kind of fast that was an answer to a question she hadn't asked. I wasn't staring at your neck. You were staring at my jugular, which is worse. I was observing your lanyard. My lanyard is clipped to my chest, not my neck. Then I was observing your chest. That's even worse. I'm aware. He said it very quietly, and for a moment the controlled, precise thing he did with his voice slipped, and underneath was something raw and appalled at itself. Harriet called at the end of week 8. Joe didn't know Harriet existed until the phone rang. It was the blood bank's main line, the one that nobody used because everyone just emailed. City Central Blood Services, this is Joe. This is Harriet Ashmore. I am calling on behalf of Mr. Vane regarding his standing inspection appointment. His what? His standing Tuesday inspection. I'm confirming next week's visit and inquiring whether you require any documentation in advance. Does he know you're calling? A pause. Then very carefully. Mr. Vane is aware that administrative support exists for his schedule. He may not be aware of this specific call. So that's a no. Another pause. Miss Sullivan, I've been managing Mr. Vane's schedule for 214 years. In that time, he has never visited the same establishment more than twice. He has now visited your facility 8 times. I would like to understand the nature of the inspection he is conducting. There's no inspection. He just shows up. The silence on the other end was extraordinary. Joe could hear centuries of professionalism fighting with something that sounded a lot like disbelief. He shows up. Every Tuesday, with fake credentials and coffee. Coffee. In a ceramic mug. He carries. Harriet stopped. Joe could hear her breathing. Vampires didn't need to breathe, which meant Harriet was doing it on purpose, which meant this was worse than Joe had thought. Miss Sullivan, I need you to understand something. I have served the Vane household through 4 wars, 2 regime changes, and a period in the 1970s that we do not discuss. I have never heard Mr. Vane voluntarily carry a beverage for someone who was not dying. He carries it 3 blocks. 3 blocks. without spilling. "He doesn't spill things," Harriet said, and it sounded like a prayer she was reconsidering. "I'll confirm next Tuesday." She hung up. Jo stared at the phone, replayed the phrase 214 years, and poured herself more of the coffee he'd brought, which was still warm because he'd been holding it with hands so cold the ceramic retained heat by contrast. 214 years. She pulled up her browser and typed his name. It took her 11 minutes to find the old records, municipal archives, land registry transfers dating back to 1802, all under variations of the same name, Edmund Vane, E. Vane, E.J. Vane. A philanthropic trust established in 1923, a Wikipedia page maintained with suspiciously professional precision, calling him a reclusive industrialist and cultural preservationist. She sat in the empty blood bank and thought about a man who had been alive since before the country existed, who showed up at her workplace every Tuesday with coffee he carried 3 blocks in the dark, who brought fake credentials he'd had printed on paper too fine for any century that used printers, who clipped on a badge that said Fangs because she told him to, and who had not blinked once in 8 visits. She wasn't afraid. She was something much worse. She was interested. The next Tuesday, she let him in without checking the credentials. "You didn't look at them," he said. "I don't need to. They're my best work. The watermark is from a regulatory body that actually exists. I know what you are, Fangs." The silence this time was the longest one yet. He stood in a lobby in his charcoal suit with his leather clipboard and his ceramic mug, and the composure that held his face in place didn't crack, but it shifted, like a wall adjusting to a weight it hadn't expected. "Who told you?" "Harriet, accidentally. She mentioned 214 years, and I did the math." "Harriet." He said the name the way you say the name of a fire you thought you'd put out. "I see. You're a vampire." "Yes." "You've been coming to a blood bank." "Yes." "For 8 weeks. He looked at the mug in his hand, the coffee, the clipboard, the visitor badge she hadn't given him yet, but both of them knew he'd clip on anyway. "I understand if this changes things," he said. "Things are already changed. They changed about week 3 when you started bringing coffee." She held out his visitor badge. Fangs, red marker. "You're still clipping this on." He clipped it on. "I have questions," she said. "I would expect nothing less." "Are you going to answer them honestly?" "I have never lied to you. The credentials were fictional. I was not." She looked at him, the dark eyes, the still face, the man inside the predator inside the suit, and made a decision that was either the smartest or the stupidest thing she'd ever done. "There's a diner 3 blocks from here that's open all night. They have terrible coffee and excellent pie." He blinked. Actually blinked. She'd never seen him do it involuntarily. "Are you asking me to?" "I'm asking you to buy me pie, Fangs, Tuesday night, after my shift, in a place with fluorescent lights and a jukebox that only plays Springsteen." "I don't eat." "I know. You'll sit there and watch me eat pie and answer my questions, and we'll see if you're as interesting as your coffee residue observations suggest." The thing that happened to his face was not a smile. It was the space where a smile would go if he remembered how. And it was better than a smile because the trying was the whole point. "Tuesday," he said. "Tuesday." Chapter 3. The Dates. The diner was called Sal's. It had been called Sal's since 1974, and the current owner was named Margaret. Edmund sat across from her in a booth with cracked vinyl seats and held a cup of coffee he would never drink, and Jo ate a piece of cherry pie and asked him questions. "How old are you?" 412. "How old do you look?" "I've been told I look 32. I was turned at 30. "What year?" 1614. She put down her fork. "You were alive during the 30 Years' War." "I was alive during several wars. They blurred together around the 2nd century. "What do you eat?" "You know what I eat." "I want to hear you say it." He looked at her across the table. The diner light was worse than the blood bank, harsher, flatter, and it should have made him look washed out, but instead it made him look like a painting in the wrong frame. Something that belonged in candlelight sitting under neon. Blood, he said. I drink blood. Human, preferably, though I can sustain on animal or stored units. The difference is, he paused, chose his words. Significant. Like the difference between instant coffee and what you bring me. Roughly. So you're basically a coffee snob, but for blood. That is a reductive and inaccurate characterization. You're a blood sommelier. I am not a blood sommelier. You can tell the difference between types, you have preferences. You showed up at a blood bank to check the quality. She pointed her fork at him. Blood sommelier. I showed up at a blood bank because I managed the supply infrastructure for 300 vampires. It was a legitimate professional visit. With a blank clipboard. The clipboard was aspirational. She grinned. He almost smiled. The almost was worth more than any smile she'd ever seen. Do you kill people? Not in a very long time. But you have. Yes. Does that bother you? He looked at his untouched coffee. It bothers me that it doesn't bother me as much as it should. Joe ate another bite of pie. He watched her eat with the focused attention of someone observing a process he could no longer participate in, but found endlessly fascinating. Why my blood bank? She said. I oversee the city's blood supply infrastructure. The blood banks, the storage facilities, the distribution networks. Vampires need a reliable source. I ensure the system works. So the inspection was real. The inspection was a pretext. The concern was real. He turned the coffee cup in his hands. I came back because of you. Because I called you Fangs. Because you called me Fangs and meant it. Because you noticed the paper and the spelling and the cold and the not blinking, and you were not afraid. I have been. He stopped, started again. I have been treated with deference for 4 centuries. Deference and fear and careful political courtesy. You offered me a juice box. It was aspirational. It was the most honest thing anyone has done for me since the Enlightenment. She laughed. He watched her laugh, and the expression on his face was the one she'd been trying to name since week 1. Not hunger, not stillness, not composure. Loss. The look of someone watching something they'd given up hoping for. They went to Sal's every Tuesday after her shift. He brought the ceramic mug and left it in the car because the diner's coffee was terrible and he refused to participate in its degradation. She ate pie. He didn't eat. Harriet called after the second date. Miss Sullivan, I'm calling to inform you that Mr. Vane has purchased a navy suit. I heard. He has never purchased clothing based on someone else's recommendation. In 400 years. I have been recommending charcoal alternatives since 1823. He has been ignoring me since 1823. A pause. He listened to you in 8 weeks. Are you upset? I am recalibrating my understanding of the universe. I'll need a few days. Take your time. I'm also expanding the file. There is now a subsection titled Sartorial Influence, Sullivan. I'm honored. You should be. It's the first subsection I've added voluntarily since 1972. On their third date, she gave him a Yelp review to read. Sal's Diner, 2 stars. The pie is adequate. The coffee is a human rights violation. The jukebox exclusively plays one artist, which I am told is normal but feels targeted. The booth seating is architecturally hostile. I will be returning. She looked up. That's you. I didn't write a Yelp review. You wrote it in your head. I'm just reading it back to you. The coffee is a human rights violation. You don't drink coffee. I don't need to drink it to know it's an insult. I have 400 years of olfactory data. Olfactory data. I can smell bad coffee from significant distances. It's not a gift. It's a burden. She put garlic bread on the table between them. His expression didn't change. That doesn't work, he said. I know. I just wanted to see if you'd flinch. I don't flinch. You flinch when I call you Edmund. He was quiet for a moment. That's different. Why? Because garlic is a seasoning. My name in your voice is... He stopped, visibly recalculated the end of that sentence, decided against every option, and said nothing. She let it sit. Some silences were better than words. On the fourth date, she brought a pocket mirror and held it up to his face. Nothing. Just the booth behind him, the cracked vinyl, the neon Sal's sign reflected in reverse. Wild, she said. It's inconvenient. I rely entirely on Harriet to tell me if my collar is straight. How does Harriet see her own collar? Harriet has not had a crooked collar since 1847. She maintains this through sheer force of will. I could be your mirror. He looked at her. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than she'd meant them. She'd meant it as a joke. She'd fix his tie, tell him when his hair was wrong. But the way his face shifted, the way the composure cracked along a line she was starting to know by heart, told her he'd heard something else entirely. Your collar's fine, she said quickly, for the record. Thank you, he said, and it sounded like he meant it about more than the collar. On their fifth date, she asked about the sun. Can you go outside during the day? Yes, at a cost. What cost? Discomfort, weakness. Extended exposure would be dangerous. He looked at the dark window of the diner. I haven't seen a sunrise in a very long time. I remember them. Do you miss it? I miss warmth, he said. And the way he said it, looking at her, not the window, made it not about the sun at all. She reached across the table and put her hand on his, warm on cold. His fingers twitched, the predator reflex, the half-second where his body registered her pulse through her skin, and then went still. He turned his hand over, palm up, and held hers. Your hand is cold, she said. Always. I don't care. I know. He looked at their hands. That's the part I can't understand. On their seventh date, he wore the navy suit. She didn't say anything about it. She didn't need to. He sat down across from her and she looked at him, and the navy brought warmth to the pale and made his eyes darker, and the whole thing worked, exactly the way she told him it would on week 6. Don't, he said. I didn't say anything. You're thinking it. I'm thinking you look adequate, which, from me, is the equivalent of a standing ovation. Harriet said the same thing, the exact same thing. She used the word adequate. Harriet and I are developing an understanding. That is precisely what concerns me. She grinned. He almost smiled. The almost was everything. She asked about turning on their 9th date. They were in his car, a black thing that was worth more than her apartment building, parked outside the diner because neither of them wanted to go inside yet. If someone's dying, she said, could you save them by turning them? He was quiet for a long time. His hands were on the steering wheel, still. It is possible. It requires a significant blood exchange. It's painful. It takes days. And it changes everything about what a person is. He looked at her. It is the one thing I would never do without consent. I have seen it done to people who didn't choose it, and the result is... His jaw tightened. There is no word for what it is. It is the most intimate violation I can imagine. But if someone was dying, if it was the only way, then I would have to choose between their death and their destruction, and neither is something I could live with. She looked at him in the dark car, 400 years old, king of something old and dangerous, holding a steering wheel in a parking lot outside a diner that served terrible coffee, talking about the worst choice he could imagine. I'm not asking you to turn me, she said. I know. I'm asking you what you'd do. I don't know. He said it like it cost him. I have always known the answer to every question. I don't know the answer to this one. She leaned across the console and kissed him. His mouth was cold. His hand came up to her jaw, cold fingers, steady, precise. And he kissed her back like a man who had waited 400 years for someone who wasn't afraid of his answers. When she pulled back, he was shaking. a tiny, controlled tremor in his hands, the kind that meant something old and disciplined had finally lost its grip. "Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday." The feeding happened on week 12. She'd been thinking about it, the biology of it, the mechanics, the intimacy. She'd been thinking about it since the paper cut in week 5, when he'd gripped the inventory rack and said, "Because it matters less than the alternative." And she'd understood that the alternative was her. They were in his apartment, spare, cold, beautiful, full of old books and older furniture and exactly one juice box on a desk next to a first edition Montaigne. "I want you to show me," she said. He went still. "Show you what?" "What it's like, for you. What I am to you when you stop pretending you're fine." "Joe, that's not..." "You've been sitting across from me in a diner for weeks, not drinking coffee and not eating pie, and holding my hand through a tablecloth because direct skin contact makes your eyes change. I've seen it. I'm not afraid of it." She held out her wrist. "Show me." "If I do this," he said, and his voice was rougher now, lower, stripped of the careful diction. "It is not a bond. A single feeding creates no permanent tie. But it is," he searched for the word, "intimate, in a way that does not have a human equivalent. I'm a big girl, Fangs." He crossed the space between them, took her hand, turned it. His thumb traced the vein at her wrist, following it from the base of her palm to the crease of her elbow. And the cold of him against the warmth of her was so sharp, it felt like standing at the edge of something. "This will hurt," he said, briefly. "I've had blood drawn. I work here." "You work at a blood bank. This is not the same." "I know." He lifted her wrist to his mouth. His lips pressed against the pulse point, and she felt her own heartbeat against his mouth, and the room went very quiet and very still. And the only sound was the hum of the city outside, while the most powerful vampire in it held her wrist like it was the only thing keeping him in this century. He bit. It hurt, sharp, precise. Not the clumsy thing she'd expected, but a clean pain that faded almost immediately into something else. Warmth, a spreading heat that started at her wrist and traveled up her arm and pooled in her chest. And for a moment, she could feel him. Not his thoughts, not his history, just his presence, like a door opening into a room she'd always known was there. He drank. Not long, 5 seconds, maybe 6, and then he pulled back. His eyes were full amber, bright and deep, and there was blood at the corner of his mouth, a single dark line against the pale, and his expression was something she had never seen on anyone's face. Wonder. Old, aching 400-year wonder at something new. "Your blood," he said, and his voice was unrecognizable, wrecked, honest, devastated by its own honesty. "Tastes like you talk." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm in a significant amount of trouble." She looked at her wrist, 2 small marks, already closing, barely visible. "Well," she said, "at least you finally donated." He stared at her. Then he laughed, really laughed, the kind that came from somewhere old and unlocked, and pulled her into him and held her against the cold of his chest, while the amber faded from his eyes and his hands stopped shaking, and the room settled into something that felt, for the first time, like it might be the beginning of something neither of them had planned for. Chapter 4. The Feral. The thing about being the Vampire King's girlfriend, a title Joe used with deliberate irreverence because the word consort made her want to set something on fire, was that most of the vampire world didn't know about her, and Edmund wanted to keep it that way. "It's not shame," he said when she asked. "It's protection. If the court learns I care about a human, you become leverage. A target. The kind of target that doesn't get warned before something happens. So I'm a secret. You're a priority. Secrets are things I keep because they serve me. You are something I keep because losing you would." He stopped. "You're a priority." She accepted this, not because she liked it, but because she'd met Harriet, and Harriet had shown her the file, now 16 pages, and the file included a section on known threats to household stability that had 7 entries, 3 of which were political factions that would use any human connection against the king without hesitation. "It's not forever," he said. "It's not forever," she agreed. She knew he had someone watching her. She'd spotted the car on her second week of dates, a black sedan that appeared on her block every Tuesday and disappeared by dawn. She didn't mention it because mentioning it would mean acknowledging that the man who brought her coffee in a ceramic mug also commanded a security infrastructure, and those two facts were easier to hold separately. But she noticed that he walked her to her car after every date, that he waited until she was inside with the doors locked before he disappeared, that his eyes swept every shadow and every doorway with the automatic focus of someone who was always cataloging threats. It happened on a Wednesday. She was walking from the parking garage to the blood bank for her overnight shift. It was 11:40 p.m. The garage was 3 blocks from the facility. She had walked it 100 times. The shadow moved wrong. That was all the warning she got. Something fast, faster than anything she'd ever seen, and cold, colder even than Edmund. A body cold that was wrong in a way his never was, because his cold was composed and controlled, and this cold was feral, unstructured, the temperature of something that had stopped trying to be anything other than what it was. It wasn't from the court. It wasn't political. It was something older and wilder, outside the system Edmund's security monitored, a creature with no house, no faction, no name on any threat list. The black sedan 3 blocks away was watching for council members, not for something that moved on walls. It hit her from the side. She went down. The concrete scraped her palms and knees, and she rolled, trying to see, trying to make sense of what was happening. And she saw it. Him, crouched on the wall of the parking garage like a spider, pale and thin and wild-eyed with pupils that were fully dilated, no iris visible. Just black. "The king's pet," it said. Its voice was wrong, broken, like a voice that had been used to scream for so long it had forgotten any other register. But the words were deliberate, calculated even, and that was worse than the wildness. This thing was feral, not mindless. "I can smell him on you." Jo got to her feet. Her palms were bleeding. The feral vampire's nostrils flared. "I'm not anyone's pet," she said, because her survival instinct and her self-respect had never been introduced, and it was too late for formal introductions. It moved, fast. She felt the impact, her back against the concrete wall, the hand at her throat, the cold that went through her like winter, and then the pain. Bright, enormous, somewhere in her abdomen, and she looked down and saw red spreading across her shirt and understood that the thing that had hit her had claws, or something close to claws, and they had gone into her. She couldn't breathe. The feral vampire leaned close. Its breath smelled like copper and rot. "He'll find you," it whispered. "He'll find you and know what I did, and it will break him. That's the point." It dropped her. She hit the ground. Above her, the feral scrambled up the wall and disappeared into the dark like something returning to a place it should never have left. Jo lay on the concrete and thought, very clearly, "I should call someone." She couldn't move her arms. The blood was warm. Her blood, going places it shouldn't, pooling under her back and soaking through her work shirt with its cartoon lanyard that said "Be positive." And the irony of that was so specific that she would have laughed if she could have breathed. She heard him before she saw him. The footsteps, his footsteps, the ones that never made sound on linoleum, but now sounded like gunshots on concrete because he was running, actually running, and she'd never heard him run. Jo. He was there, above her. His face, the composure gone, completely gone, replaced by something animal and ancient and terrified in a way that 400 years of predator evolution had not prepared him for. "Hey, Fangs," she said, or tried to say. It came out wrong. His hands were on her, cold on the wound, pressing, his face white, whiter than usual, which she hadn't thought was possible. His eyes were amber, and they were not beautiful. They were the eyes of something that had seen centuries of death and was watching the one death it could not survive. The injury is, he stopped, his medical assessment voice, the one that had 4 centuries of battlefield triage in it, broke. Joe, it's deep. I can't stop this. Not like this. Hospital. You won't make it to a hospital. That's dramatic. Joe. His voice cracked. Not the managed to real drop she knew. A new sound. The sound of the floor giving way under everything he was. I can save you, but not as you are. She looked at him. The parking garage lights were buzzing. Her blood was warm and getting warmer, which she knew from her supply chain logistics training was a very bad sign, because blood outside the body didn't stay warm for long. You said you'd never do it without consent, she whispered. I know what I said. You said it was the most intimate violation you could imagine. I know. Edmund. He flinched. She'd never called him Edmund. In 14 weeks, through juice boxes and fake credentials and ceramic mugs and cherry pie and a navy suit and his cold mouth on her wrist, she had never once called him by his name. I don't want to die in a parking garage, she said. I know. I don't want to die. I know. Do it. His hands were shaking. The tremor she'd seen once before, after the kiss in the car, after the feeding. But worse now. Full body. The creature and the man fighting over the same set of hands. He lowered his mouth to the wound at her side. Not to feed, to complete what had to be a mutual exchange. He took her blood first, a single desperate pull, and the sound he made was not hunger, it was grief. Then he bit his own wrist. The blood, his blood, was dark, darker than human blood, and it moved slower. He held it to her mouth. Drink, he said, and I'm sorry, and I will spend every year you give me earning this back. She drank. The cold hit her first, then the dark. Chapter 5. After. She woke up angry. That was the first thing. Before the new sharpness of the light, before the silence of her own chest where a heartbeat should have been, before the cold that lived in her bones now like it had always been there, the anger. She was in a room she didn't recognize, dark curtains, old wood, a fire in the hearth that she could hear, actually hear, the individual crackle of each piece of kindling, and the smell of something she couldn't identify, something layered and complex that her old nose would have called room, and her new one was disassembling into wood polish, aged leather, linen, ash, and underneath all of it, him. Edmund was sitting in a chair by the window. He hadn't moved. She could tell because the dust in the air near him was perfectly still. No current, no breath, no displacement. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen and never wanted to see again. The expression of someone waiting to be destroyed by the person they loved. How long? She said. Her voice was different, clearer, colder. She hated it. 3 days. 3 days. The transformation takes time. I stayed. Did you sleep? I don't sleep. Right. She sat up. Everything was louder, sharper, more. The fire was too bright. The fabric under her hands had texture she'd never noticed before, a weave she could count thread by thread. Right, because you're a vampire. And now I'm a vampire, because you made that decision. You said, I said do it while I was bleeding to death on a parking garage floor. That's not consent, Edmund. That's desperation. He didn't argue. He sat in the chair and he took it. His hands were in his lap, still, the way she'd seen 100 times in the blood bank, the predator stillness, the composed exterior. But she could see his jaw, the muscle working, the ghost of a pulse that wasn't there, the body remembering an emotion it no longer had the circulation to express. You're right, he said. I know I'm right. You are right, and I would do it again. His voice broke on the last word, not cracked, broke, like a thing that had held for 400 years and had met the one weight it couldn't carry. I would do it again because the alternative was watching you die in a parking garage with a lanyard that said "Be positive," while your blood, Joe, the blood I have held in my mouth and called the most honest thing I've ever tasted, pooled on concrete. And I could not let that happen. You took the choice. I took the choice. You said, in the car, on our 9th date, you said it was the most intimate violation you could imagine. You said you'd never do it without consent. You said, I know what I said. I have an excellent memory. I remember everything I have ever said to you, including the things I should have said and didn't. And I remember the sound of your voice when you told me you weren't asking me to turn you. And I remember thinking, good, because I never want to be the person who does that. And then I was in a parking garage and you were dying, and I was that person. She was crying. She didn't know vampires could cry. The tears were different, slower, cooler, but they were there, and her new body was producing them like it was the one human function it had decided to keep. I was supposed to grow old, she said. I had a life. I had a retirement plan. I had a subscription to a Cheese of the Month club that I was 3 months into and really enjoying, Edmund. And now I'm going to outlive the cheese industry. Joe, I'm going to outlive the cheese industry and the blood bank and the diner and Margaret who runs the diner, who always gave me extra whipped cream because she said I looked like I needed it. And I'm never going to need extra whipped cream again because I don't eat anymore, do I? No, I don't eat. I don't sleep. My heart doesn't beat. She put her hand on her chest, flat, quiet, the silence where a lifetime of rhythm should have been. You took my heartbeat. He stood, crossed the room, knelt in front of her. The vampire king, on his knees, in a bedroom that smelled like ash and old wood, and his face was wrecked. Not the managed face, not the composed face, not the face that had ruled a city for centuries. The face of a man who had broken the one promise he'd made to the one person it mattered to. I took your heartbeat, he said. I took your warmth. I took your ability to eat cherry pie and walk in the sun and grow old and die. I took every future you had planned and I replaced it with this. He gestured at the room, at himself, at the dark and the quiet and the forever of it. And if you hate me for it, I will understand. And I will still be here. Because you being alive and hating me is something I can survive. You being dead is not. You don't get to decide that for me. I know. You don't get to decide that my life is worth more than my choice. That's not love, Edmund, it's love. He said it simply, without the composure, without the 4 centuries of carefully managed emotion. Just a man on his knees saying the truest thing he'd ever said. It's love, and it's selfish, and it's wrong, and it's the only thing I've ever done that I'm both ashamed of and certain of at the same time. I am sorry. I am not sorry. I am both of those things, and I will be both of those things for as long as you let me stand in the same room as you. She was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled. The room breathed around them, or didn't, because neither of them needed it to. When I was lying on that concrete, she said, I thought about the diner. About Sal's, about the booth with the cracked vinyl and the jukebox and the pie I was never going to finish. I thought about you sitting across from me holding coffee you'd never drink, and I thought, I'm not done. I'm not done with the diner, or the pie, or the man who carries a ceramic mug 3 blocks because the disposable cups offend him. Her voice cracked. The new voice. The cold, clear one she was still learning how to use. I wanted more Tuesdays. I just wanted to be the one who chose them. I know, he said. I know. Did it hurt? She asked, watching it. Yes. Tell me. He closed his eyes. He never closed his eyes. In all the Tuesdays, all the diner dates, all the false inspections, she'd never seen him close his eyes voluntarily. He kept them open, the way a man keeps his hand on a weapon, not out of readiness, but out of the understanding that the world required watching. I heard you, he said, from 3 blocks away. I heard your heartbeat change. It went, his voice fractured. It went irregular. And then it went fast. And then it started to slow. and I ran. I have not run in 200 years. I ran, and when I got there, you were on the ground, and you were bleeding, and you looked at me and you said, "Hey, Fangs." And your voice was wrong, Joe. Your voice was wrong. And I have heard thousands of people die, and none of their voices were yours. She was crying again, the slow, cool tears that her new body produced as its one concession to the human she'd been 12 hours ago. "I'm sorry I didn't get there sooner," he said. "I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. I'm sorry I could only do the one thing I swore I'd never do. And I'm sorry it was the right thing and the wrong thing at the same time." She looked at him, on his knees, 400 years old and kneeling on a bedroom floor because a 5'2" woman from a blood bank was the thing that had finally, comprehensively, permanently undone him. "You kept the juice box," she said. He blinked. "What?" "On your desk, next to the Montaigne. You kept a juice box from week 1 for 14 weeks. You kept it because I gave it to you before I knew what you were." "Yes." "You read my thesis." "Yes." "You bought a navy suit because I told you the charcoal was wrong." "Yes." "You carried coffee 3 blocks in a ceramic mug because the disposable cups were an insult." "They were. They are." She put her hand on his face. It was different now, her hand, his face, both cold, the temperature contrast gone. The thing that had made them opposites was gone. They were the same temperature, the same stillness, the same quiet where a heartbeat should have been. "I'm still angry," she said. "I know. I'm going to be angry for a while." "I know. I might be angry for a century." "I have centuries." She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, cold on cold. Two creatures that didn't breathe, touching in the dark. "You owe me a cheese subscription," she said. "I was on month 3. They were doing Gruyere." The sound he made was not a laugh. It was the wreckage of a laugh, something that had been shattered and was trying to reassemble itself into joy. It was the most human sound she'd ever heard from him. "I will buy you every cheese subscription available," he said. "You can't eat cheese. I will buy them and watch you not eat them, and we will both pretend that's not devastating." She kissed him, cold on cold, no temperature contrast, no warm on cold, no human meeting inhuman. Just 2 mouths in the dark, and it was different, and it was wrong, and it was theirs. "Fangs," she said. "Yes. I'm keeping the name. I would expect nothing less. And I'm going back to the blood bank." "You work at a blood bank." "I run a blood bank. And now I'm a vampire who runs a blood bank." She almost smiled. "You have to admit that's funny." "It's horrifying. It's structurally absurd. Harriet will need to expand the file." "Harriet's file is going to need its own filing cabinet." He held her. She let him, 2 cold bodies in a dark room, breathing because they chose to, not because they needed to. And the fire crackled, and the city hummed, and somewhere in the blood bank her shift was being covered, by someone who didn't know that the overnight manager had become the most qualified person in the history of the profession to understand exactly what was in those bags. Epilogue. The loyalty card stayed in his jacket pocket. She gave him a new one, her own, matching, and stamp it once. "Aspirational," she said. Harriet's file reached 23 pages and was reclassified from Irregular Conduct Blood Bank Division to Permanent Operational Adjustment, Sullivan Protocol. The t-shirt he'd earned from the old loyalty card, "I gave blood and all I got was this lousy t-shirt," he wore to a council session. She wore a matching one to the next. On a Tuesday, 3 months later, she sat in the blood bank break room at 2 in the morning, and he sat next to her, and neither of them ate or drank or breathed. The hunger was still new, a low pull behind her ribs that she was learning to manage the way she'd once managed inventory, systematically, precisely, with a spreadsheet. Edmund found both appalling and impressive. She kept a cooler under her desk now. Harriet supplied it. The file had a new section, Dietary Logistics, Sullivan. The fluorescent lights buzzed the way they always had, and the label printer jammed the way it always did, and she said, Fangs. We're both vampires sitting in a blood bank at 2 in the morning. Yes. This is the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to anyone. He looked at her, the dark eyes, the still face, the creature that had lived for 400 years, and knelt on a bedroom floor and bought a navy suit, and carried coffee 3 blocks and kept a juice box on his desk, because a 5'2" woman had called him Fangs on a Tuesday night and meant it. Yes, he said, it is. She put her head on his shoulder. It wasn't warm anymore. Neither of them was warm. But it was there, and he was there, and the blood bank hummed around them like it always had, and she was still calling him Fangs, and he was still answering, and outside the sun was coming up, and neither of them had anywhere to be until it went back down. Which was fine. They had time. They had nothing but time.